Hey everybody, welcome back to the Resilient Purpose Podcast. Today we are going to meet Harry Potvin, who's the host of the Mental Corner, a podcast that he has created to talk about mental health, and more specifically have conversations about people's experiences with mental health. We talk a lot about his journey of dealing with mental health, but nobody talking about it and nobody knowing what to do when we come across somebody that is experiencing mental health problems. And we even talk about some really important things related to seeking help and meeting with a therapist, and what do you do when you meet with a therapist that looks at his watch the whole time. Just to really the journey and some of the ups and downs of getting help, and then finally recognizing what we need to do to take care of ourselves and create wellness in our lives. And so I think it's a very awesome episode that I think will be helpful for a lot of people. So I encourage you guys to take a listen and give us feedback. Let us know how we're doing. Is that a common practice to kind of take care of yourself? Is gratitude and just kind of recognizing things that you do have rather than things that you don't?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it puts everything into perspective, right? Like, when I was really going through it, my mind was I had such tunnel vision that like I couldn't see everything around me. Like when I really was suicidal and everything like that, I couldn't, take that step back and go, hey, I have some pretty good friends. My family's pretty good.
Right.
I'm doing well on the swim team. I'm doing decent in school, not great, but I'm doing decent. I've got money. Like it's hard to see those things when you're in it. So I try to do it as much as I can because it gives me that perspective that normally I never had when I was struggling.
Yeah. So I'm curious because, mental health, I think mental health in terms of awareness is certainly improving. I mean, there's a lot of, stuff out there supporting kind of recognizing mental health. But when you were struggling, and I think it goes back to high school years, if I'm accurate in remembering, did you recognize it was mental health? Like, was there much about mental health at the time? Did you kind of, I mean, or is that more of a reflection of like, kind of that's kind of how I experienced it? Or like in the moment, like when it started, did you even understand what was going on, or how did you kind of interpret what was happening in those moments?
Yeah, so I mean, there was talk about mental health when I was growing up, and I'm not old. Like the conversation is just slowly starting to shift now,
Yeah.
recently, and even then we still have a lot of work. But when I was
Right.
growing up in high school and elementary school, like the only talk that we had about mental health and mental illness or mental health challenges was that, oh, those people are crazy.
Mm.
It was like you could immediately tell who was struggling with their mental health because they were immediately ostracized from the group. Like
Sure.
people were just like, I want nothing to do with that because everything that we have in our knowledge is that you're crazy
Yeah.
and you're not fit to be in normal society. So when I was going through it, like in high school and in elementary school, like I don't know if I knew exactly what it was because there was such a lack of research in terms of, oh, this is what you're experiencing. You might potentially have depression. You might potentially have anxiety. There was none of that. I was just kind of labeled a hothead as a kid, because I would lash out. I'd get angry because, growing up, that was my only kind of visual of how men registered emotion was that they got angry. And
Mhm.
so that's how I thought it was to express myself. And so I was just labeled a hothead most of the time and kind of just pushed to the side, like, oh, that's just Harry. He's just angry all the time. Like, don't worry about him. Just watch what you say around him. And that's kind of it. There was never really any for sure acknowledgement that maybe my mental health was kind of deteriorating.
Yeah. Where did you, I mean, do you feel comfortable talking about where you kind of got those kind of themes or messages of this is how we express ourselves through kind of anger outbursts, or how did that kind of, where did you get that message, or where did you experience that?
Yeah, for sure. So it wasn't really family. My family never really talked about mental health.
Mhm.
When I was growing up, it was just kind of not. They weren't purposely hiding it. It was just kind of never really a topic. But I got all of that expression of emotion from when I was growing up on the swim team. And, as a young kid, you're 10, you're 11, you look up to the big guys. Like you're looking for guidance, you're looking for a role model. And the only role model you see every morning at 4 a.m. is that older dude who's swimming, right? And so
Yeah.
I looked up to them a lot for guidance. But unfortunately for me, the people I was looking up to were not the greatest. And so if they had a bad race or they didn't like something in practice, they would, punch the lockers, hit their head on the wall, swear at people. And so as a young kid looking up to them, they were my role models. And so I was
Right.
like, oh, that is how you express emotion. Okay, I get it now. And that's kind of where it stemmed from. It was just that idea that men have to be strong, and if they're upset, they have to be angry and forceful. And that's just kind of where it developed.
Well, and maybe even just in simple things of like how to handle disappointment, how to handle losing. I mean,
Yeah.
was there elements? I mean, because I always see kind of, it's interesting that you saw those messages in sports, because we talk a lot about kind of sports also being a place where we can find our way out or find healing, or there's a lot of benefit from the physical activity of sport, but then there are also like a lot of unintended consequences that can come from sport in terms of maybe how the people that are maybe structuring or guiding the sport can create those expectations, and what does it mean when you don't meet those expectations. Were there things that kind of although swim was something that you found success in, maybe was hard to deal with in terms of, or kind of made it hard to kind of really enjoy that aspect of your life?
I think, well, I was always really hard on myself in terms of how I swam and the results I got. I never really looked at it um, step by step, which ultimately never works. I kind of always wanted to focus on the big picture and the glory, and wanted that fast time that you would see people get. So I mean, in that regard, I was very hard on myself in terms of my results, and I think ultimately that bruised my confidence. But I guess the ultimate one for swimming especially, uh look, you're in a bathing suit for like 2 hours a day. You're in a Speedo. Like
Yeah,
that's the
no, yeah, it's not even
expectation.
just like a normal like kind of short bathing suit, it's, oh yes, I
That's what I'm saying. It's not flattering. And I was
very
never
vulnerable.
very vulnerable. I was never a skinny kid. I was always, well, my nickname in university was short and wide. Like
Oh my
I'm
god.
5'9", and at my very lightest I'm 165, 170, and that's like I'm cutting, like I'm not eating.
Right.
I'm usually around 200, but like I was never a skinny kid, and in a Speedo that's not the nicest thing to look at. So when
Right.
when I'm on deck and everyone is tall and has, muscle, like six packs, and they're cut, they're lean, and I'm not, you know, I, as a kid growing up, already struggling with self-worth, in other aspects of life, seeing that now, you're excluding yourself. Or sorry, not excluding you. You feel more isolated now more than ever, because you're like, why can't I look like that? And I hired the trainers, and I did the diets, and I tried to not eat and run and replace my meals with exercise. I did everything, and I just, at the end of the day, it was just, I think that was the toughest part of sport for me, was comparing myself so heavily to everyone around me that I completely disregarded how I was feeling.
Well, and that's the nature of sports in general. I mean, because
Mm,
competition is a slippery slope. It can drive us and kind of actually lift us in a good direction, but it also can kind of really put us down. And as there's that negative side of competition, especially if we are comparing ourselves or put a lot of value on ourselves
mhm.
related to outcomes. And is that kind of how you judged try to progress? You weren't necessarily looking at your own progress, but how do I compare to these other people?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many examples, and from universities specifically, where at the beginning of the season we would do goal setting, and I would put out a goal, and everyone around me is like, that's a little fast, don't you think? Like that's a little out of your possibility. Like that's like 10 seconds away from what you are currently. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still a little slower than what that guy's doing.
Yeah.
So if I get to that point, I can actually compete with them. So yeah, competition definitely hindered me in terms of all of that stuff. I love competition. I still do.
Right.
I mean, I'm a competitive person by nature,
Yeah.
but in that regard, it was I definitely fell down that slippery slope, like you said.
When did you kind of recognize that about yourself, and how have you shifted that in terms of, you said you're still competitive? Are you approaching competition a little differently? I mean, have you made a conscious effort to kind of not compare yourself to other people, or is that something that you still struggle with?
Um, I recognized that unfortunately when I was done swimming.
Right.
I once you're out, you're looking
Just in
back in,
time.
you're like, yeah, that didn't go well.
Yeah.
So I still do the comparison here and there, and I'm very competitive still. But I think now I kind of use it as fuel more so as me comparing myself and going, oh, why don't I have what they have? Because again, going back to the gratitude practice, I try to practice that every day, and I try to be thankful for what I have because, some people aren't so lucky.
Mhm.
And then practicing that gratitude still gives me the ability to be competitive with people, not just in my field, but at work or what have you. It gives me the opportunity to be competitive, but it also keeps me grounded in the sense where I'm not going, but I want what they have. This isn't fair. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Did did coaches ever talk to you about mindset in sports? I had this conversation. I teach at a local college, and I get a lot of athletes in my class. And she was on the girl on the girls basketball team at the college that I teach. And I just even asked, I said, do they work on your mindset? Did they talk to you about kind of like, just you overall able to, the mental part of things? And she's like, gosh, I wish,
mm,
and I'm curious as to kind of in the sports world, especially at an elite high level area. I always kind of go back to that Yogi Berra quote, about baseball. It's 90% mental and the other half physical. It's like that's a huge piece, and not just baseball, but every sport. But do we spend time with it? I'm curious if that if that was ever talked about, or if coaches ever kind of made it a point to support the mindset aspect of games, or was it all, you know, the physical aspect or the performance aspect of, you know, times and, things like that?
yeah, no, mindset was never talked about, honestly. Like, you had the emphasis on routine, like
Mhm.
find a good routine pre-race or pre-practice and stick with it. You had rest is important, of course.
Sure.
And then there was the visualization aspect where, like, we would sit there, close our eyes and try to visualize how our race went. But in terms of mindset, that's about as far as it went.
Right.
Especially in high school, that was never talked about. Mindset, it was almost laughable. Like, if you like, mental health was never a thing. It was just grind out the practice and the results will pay off later. If I had known that, mindset and mental health was like 90% of sport, I can only imagine how much happier I would have been with my swim career, honestly, because it just was never talked about. It was always
Yeah.
pushed to the side over physical fitness.
Well, and I almost kind of see, and I've seen this in certain coaches like posts on social media. It's almost like the idea that if you don't respond to the way I'm coaching, if you don't meet my expectations, then that's on you and that's your fault. And that,
Mm,
like, that kind of like, you just gotta deal with the way I coach you because I care or whatever, but no one really kind of is attuned to the individual athlete and what they're going through and what they need in that moment, and kind of recognizing those self-defeating patterns that probably contribute to, those mental health struggles. I mean, I'm sure that, and I don't know if you saw it in yourself, but you probably maybe even recognize it in some of your teammates, that mental health struggles even being tied to the athletics piece of it.
oh yeah, 1,000%. And not just mental health challenges, like burnout. Burnout was never talked about either.
Yeah.
There was an over glorification of going to more practices than the next person without really taking for account how that's going to affect your mental. Waking up at 4 a.m. every morning is never great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, you could definitely see it. It's just, it was never a theme, or never anything that was talked about, for sure.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And I'm familiar with the 4 a.m. practice. I grew up playing hockey, and ice time was few and far between. So
Yeah.
practice at 4, well, getting up at 4, practice at like 5, and then having to go to school, and
Yep.
is yeah, quite a challenge. How much of sport was tied into your mental health struggles, or was it other things that kind of interfered? Or
Sports was actually, I'll thank sports every day, because it was the outlet for me. It was, it taught me, life skills in terms of like discipline, in terms of working hard but not too hard. You figure
right.
that out, working under stress. And it was just an outlet for me when I was feeling like garbage.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of like what contributed to my challenges in mental health, I mean, it was a whole load of factors. Um, I mean, right from, you could go all the way back to elementary school, when I was the more emotional kid. I was the more emotional guy. I wasn't interested in what the other boys were interested in, and immediately I was targeted because of it. And just being bullied so hard, and sitting there thinking like, why am I getting picked on? Why am I getting targeted? Like, why can't I like what they like? I don't get it. So right from the get-go, you have that questioning your self-worth, you have that questioning yourself in general, um, at such a young age. And then you add family troubles into there, and then you get into high school, and your hormones are going all over the place, is
Right.
all wacky. But
Right.
you haven't addressed anything from elementary school. You're just kind of accepting the term hothead, or that guy's just angry. And so it was a whole melting pot of stuff. But at the core of it, it was just the fact that I suppressed every little thing, every emotion I felt, every time I felt sad, every time I felt angry, anything that ever bugged me, I kept it down. I didn't want anyone to know. And just like a tea kettle, when you put it on the hot stove, eventually it's just going to boil over. And once it did in university, I didn't have the tools to deal with it. And I think that's ultimately what started that.
And when did you, was there a pivotal moment that got you to kind of turn things around, or to recognize, okay, I need this, what I'm doing is not working, I need to kind of change what I'm doing to get back on track, or to find a new path?
Yeah, no, it was in my last year of university, and my mental health had taken a really significant dip, um like right before this. But again, I kept suppressing it. I didn't want to go get help. I refused it. And then the suicidal ideation really kicked in. And I had suicidal ideation pretty much my whole life. Like, I didn't find my life worthy,
Uh-huh.
to be completely honest with you. And I attempted a couple times to take my life, but this was significantly different, in the sense where it felt like all the color that was around me was sucked out. Like, I was looking through a gray lens, and I found comfort in knowing that I wasn't going to be here anymore. Like, whenever there was a stressful, event, or something didn't go my way, or something, whatever it was, I was sitting there just thinking like, it's fine. I'm not going to be here much longer. So just weather this storm out, because it's the last one.
Right.
And that was the theme, the three words I just said, the last one. Like, we did a team cheer, for my swim team, and I was looking around, I'm like, this is my last cheer. Like, I was dead set on it. Or like conversations with friends, I was like, this is the last one we're gonna have. Like, and thinking nothing of it. I think that was the scariest part, was that when you think about things like that, and you think this is my last one, usually it's kind of a big deal.
Right.
It's like, oh, there's a lot of weight to those three words, like the last one. But in this sense, there wasn't. It was just, I want to get whatever I'm doing done as fast as possible, so I can get to the end result. And so in that last, attempt, I got incredibly close. And I just remember afterwards thinking like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what am I doing right now? Because at the end of the day, through all the smoke and mirrors, I didn't want to die. Like, that's not, I didn't want to. I loved my family and friends. I loved what I had. I just, I needed help and I just didn't know how to get it. And so that was, I guess, my final cry. And then after that, just thinking about my friends and my family and myself, like I wasn't old,
Right.
and I was dead set on never seeing my 20th, my 21st birthday. I remember I hit 20 and I got so angry at myself for getting there. Like I was so pissed off that I had hit that milestone. And so just taking all those into account, that's kind of when I was really like, I need to fix this bad.
Yeah. Was there, you said you had made previous attempts to the more bigger one that kind of changed everything. Were those things that people had awareness of, or was that something that you tried and then no one really knew that you tried? Or, I mean, were there any kind of signs that people saw, and, what kind of response were you getting in those moments? Or had you, because you stuffed it all down, also kept it from, like we were talking in the very beginning, like, this is the mask I wear, I got to let everybody know. I mean, outside of being the hothead, I got to let everybody know that I'm okay, or that everything's fine and nothing's wrong. Was that kind of an aspect of it to where it got that far?
Um, inter- I mean, to some extent, there were some really, really close friends of mine, who were aware. But there's just such a lack of understanding. Like
No
they
one
couldn't
told you.
really comprehend why I would do something like that. And so there was a lot of confusion. Um, but for the most part, like, teammates, friends who weren't close to me, that close anyway, teachers, coaches, things like that, no one knew because I didn't want them to. Because you hear about stories like this and you hear about people who struggle all the time. And again, when I was growing up, the only idea was that they were crazy. And I was like, I really don't want that label. And so, I can try. And if I succeed, I never have to admit it. They're
Right.
just going to figure it out. But if I don't succeed, I don't want them knowing that I tried. And so
Right.
before that last one, like maybe two or three people knew. And again, it was just, you know, and I love my friends for this. Like they let you know how much they love you and how much they're there for you and things like that. It's the only problem, it's not their fault at all. The only problem is that when you're in a state like that, it's almost a waste of energy saying that.
Right.
In a sense, I say that delicately because I want people to,
Well,
you know,
a lot of times when your views of yourself is so in the opposite of that, when someone
mhm,
says they love you, your brain can dismiss that very easily. Like,
yeah,
you even become like, whenever you try to counter somebody's logic about themselves, they almost get further entrenched in that, because the idea of believing something different is just so foreign. And
mhm,
you said you've been, for as long as you can remember, feeling this way, feeling ostracized or not feeling able to fit in, or, so the idea that someone would feel this way about you or love you or whatever just probably didn't feel, accurate, you know and
right.
and what does it mean, if that is accurate, what does it mean for what you have to do? And that even sometimes can get people in trouble, where it's like, oh, I have all these people love me and look how I treat them, and it just kind of reinforces that shame a lot of times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it did. What do you think when you reflect back? Do you think about kind of like what do you look for in support now? Or do you have a way of trying to, like, be more engaged with people about your mental health and try to incorporate those supports in your life about that? Or what, is there stuff that's different now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I was asked to do a mental health panel at my university, kind of when I was going through the recovery after the last attempt.
Okay.
And, I kind of decided for myself that this was going to be the one time I open up about everything
Yeah.
because, I was getting the help, I was getting all of this. And I was like, I can't hide it anymore because every time I hide it, it results in this. And so, that was kind of the first time where I was really open about everything. I'd been open about, being sad here and there and struggling and being angry, but there was never any talk of suicidal ideation. There was never any in-depth talk about how much I hated who I was.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this is going to be it. But, there's some questions going through my head the whole time prepping for this thing. It's like, are my friends going to view me as less of a person, as less of a man? Are my teammates going to view me as less of a captain or less of an athlete? Because all these things are, beliefs that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have all these questions circling, and, you get to the day, and I'm going to be honest, I don't remember saying anything. My brain went into such shock. I blacked out. I have to watch videos to remember what I said.
Right.
But yeah, like I just don't remember it. But afterwards, like, it's out there,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone heard it. And immediately the support comes flooding.
Yeah.
And they're like, listen, I just never knew. And so having that new openness with your friends and your loved ones, that automatically invites the support. So, doing that ultimately gave me that support system that I was so desperate for, and that I still have to this day.
Well, yeah. And that's the way you're predicting the way people react was, based on how you felt about yourself and not rooted in reality. Because people, have kind of that, they want to help. They want to help those that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't know, but I think, yeah, you spent a lot of like, I don't know how they're going to react. Right. Because it's not a commonplace for people to openly talk about, their mental health. Now, if you had a swim injury, you would have been open about your swim injury and, gotten the help. But when it comes to a mental health injury, we're so uncertain about how people are going to react and respond.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, injuries in swimming happen all the time, that wear and tear. I had a couple myself, but from growing up, no one I knew ever opened up about mental health ever. Like, you could tell that people were struggling, but no one had ever admitted it. So to be in that position, knowing that all my role models had kept it under hush hush, like kept it under wraps, I was like, man, what am I doing? Like that was the thought. It's like, do you really have to be the first, man? Like you can't wait until one other person does it. Like that was literally my inner dialogue. It's like, why does it have to be you, man? But I mean, hey, I'm glad I did it, because not only did it open up that support, but it opened up conversation. There's a lot of teammates I have a lot of teammates I had, who never talked about it, and then just started communicating because of the fact that they saw someone open up.
You opened up other people's doors. Yeah.
Yeah, that exactly. And just to be able to do that is just, it makes opening up so worth it.
What did that do for the way you felt about yourself, or did that change kind of your outlook on yourself? Just kind of recognizing that, the way you thought people would respond was different, and, you actually had that support. I mean, was that something that kind of gave you hope and, the idea that, hey, I can get better?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing that it did was help me realize, like, I'm a lot more similar than I thought I was, because like I said, in elementary school, I was like, why am I so different from everybody, every single person? That's the idea. Why am I so different from every single person? The reality is you're not.
Mm-hmm.
You're overthinking it. Like everyone goes through stuff. There was just this idea that no one did. And so, seeing that reception, hearing that reception of people going, my brother went through something, my dad did, my mom did, my teammate, my boyfriend, whatever it is, hearing that, I'm like, damn, there's a lot of people, like this, I thought it was just me.
Right.
And so that immediately made me feel more included. And that was huge.
Yeah. Well, and we, there's power in group and being able to normalize what you're going through. And I think it's hard because I think, even elements of kind of how your message growing up was, well, if people have mental health problems, they're crazy. And that kind of is kind of the world, we live in terms of disorders and diagnosis and labels that we get when you seek treatment. You almost have to kind of, if you're going to seek out therapy, you have to kind of identify that something's wrong with you. And rather than, that I'm struggling with something and it's just something that a lot of people can struggle with. And it's not that something's wrong with me or that I'm broken, but that I just need emotional support just as much as I would need, physical health support if I had an injury. So
yeah,
that makes it a challenge. So you started a podcast called The Mental Corner?
I did.
What's your mission or goal with that? What do you try to accomplish with your podcast, The Mental Corner?
Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of just stemmed from me realizing that I wasn't, as alone as I thought I was in terms of struggling. And I wanted it to originally just be a series of me talking to the camera by myself, telling them stories that I went through, in hopes that it would help somebody. And then my friend who lived next door, he was like, let me come on for an episode. And he was another team member on the swim team.
Yeah.
And we just talked about sports and mental health. And that video got really good reception. And I remember his dad and his dad's friends came down for a birthday. And we were just sitting in the room, drinking beer, talking about mental health. And these guys are like 50. They're like 50, 60. They're like, we've never talked about this stuff. But we watched your video and it, sparked up a conversation. And so that's kind of where the podcast got inspired, is that, I love talking to people and I love sharing stories. And ultimately, I saw firsthand what a discussion, the discussion was so easy. It's just me and my friend. Like, we talk all the time, but
Sure.
I saw firsthand what the ripple effect was and how open it can get people and how connected it can get people. And so ultimately, that's just the goal of the show. I don't really have another goal. I just love talking to people.
Right.
And I think that, I mean, this is so corny, but like, if one person sees the episode and goes, I can kind of relate to something like that, and then goes to their friend and goes, they start talking about it, like, that sends that ripple effect out to God knows where because of the internet. But that's ultimately the goal. I want to make as many ripple effects as I can.
No, yeah, that's a powerful thing, and you don't truly know what kind of impact you can have, and so you definitely can reach a lot of people that you didn't realize you could reach just by having a conversation you would have with the cameras off. So it's nice to be able to share your story and things like that. How did you get back on track? Like, how did you get help, and what kind of help did you get, or what was kind of your method of supporting your own mental health?
What did I do to get back on track? Yeah. So in a therapy 6 different times throughout university. And of those 6 times, none of them worked. Like, right. I met with people who, who talked over me, who didn't make eye contact, who checked their watch, and there was never a connection there. And so I just thought it was me. I thought, this lack of connection between me and the therapist, because you always hear therapy works, always. Sure. And whoever goes to the therapy, gets saved. And so I thought it was just something wrong with me. And I remember, the first time I ever went to a therapist, they were half an hour late. And I remember I was having a panic attack in her room because I was sitting there alone thinking, what am I doing? Like, only crazy people go to therapy. Why am I here? And, she came in, she didn't acknowledge that she was late. She gave me the up and down and she's like, so what's wrong with you? And I was like, that is a very aggressive question.
Wow. But like, no, we just cut right to it.
Right to the chase. And I was like, listen, I just don't like who I am. I'm having suicidal thoughts. I feel like I'm very low in the dumps and I'm not motivated to do anything. She wrote me a prescription for medication, said good luck, and kicked me out of her office. And so when I was like, that's therapy? Like, that's it? No. And so I was like, oh my God. So my whole idea of therapy was, I don't want to deal with that.
Sure.
And absolutely. So I say this all to say that when I finally decided to get the help I desperately needed in my final year of university, I opened up to a close friend who was also on the swim team. And I told her, like, listen, I tried to take my life and I need to get help. And she was like, well, go to counseling services at the university. It's free. You need to go see someone. And I said, no. I don't need that, because the last 6 times it did not help. And it only made me feel worse. And so what she did, and I'll never forget it, was she held my hand on the way there. She was like, you've gone alone every other time. Like, let me be there for you. And she walked me there, and we met with a therapist, and it was like straight out of a movie. This lady was completely different from everyone. And, you notice right away, like I got in there and I couldn't make eye contact with her. I was looking around like this, my eyes were shifting, and my body language was just like slouched over.
Yeah.
Like my skin was pale. Like you could tell that it wasn't great. And so the first thing she said was, listen, I can tell you're not in a good state right now. I'm worried about you. Here's my phone number. Come back when you want to talk. But if anything happens, please give me a call. Mm-hmm. Right there. I was like, you get it. You know, this is the one. I got her. That's where the help really started, was that idea. It was that idea shift. Again, like when I opened up and I was like, oh, those thoughts in my head are wrong, or not wrong, but it's just, it wasn't what it actually was. I guess that's what wrong means. But
well, I mean, I think like they're still kind of your thoughts, and they're not, they're how you feel, or they're how you think, and you have to learn how to kind of deal with that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, immediately my idea of therapy shifted. Yeah. And I loved talking to her. We talked twice a week, I think. Mm-hmm. It was like a routine thing. And then, after a couple of weeks, she brought up medication, antidepressants. And again, I was hesitant because it had just kind of been thrown in my face without any real solution. And she straight up told me, she was like, are you hesitant to take them? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Because, I've heard that people get addicted. You hear all these stories. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't want a happy pill. And she was like, it's only 20% of the recovery. It's not 100. Right. The 80% comes from therapy and self-help and all of these things, but the antidepressant isn't the sole answer for you. And that right away, I was like, okay, you know what? She's putting this into a perspective that I kind of like. Right. And so, I took the antidepressants for a while, and man, it was a different experience, but I took those, and then therapy. I started practicing gratitude, of course. I was more open to people. So there was more communication. There was more normalizing what I was going through. Just all of these things really got me back on track and really kind of put, me at the forefront for the first time in forever.
Yeah. Yeah. You started appreciating yourself and taking care of yourself. So the sixth therapist that you saw before this person that you got to, you were able to kind of still keep searching. And I know there was that one friend, but you kind of illustrated something that I think is really important is, there's a ton of good coaches, there's a ton of good teachers, but then there are also people that are really not on their A game and not appropriate. So going to one or even six might not be the ones, that are mm-hmm. good for you, but there can still be somebody out there. So I appreciate, or I applaud your ability to persevere through that. We have certainly have heard feedback like that. Community behavioral health is such a challenging field just because nobody talks about mental health, because there's not really any normalized way to take care of your mental health in society. There is such a significant need for mental health, and there's just not enough people to kind of meet that need. And so, you can have turnover and burnout and changes in therapy, it becomes a mess. So you really have to find a way to kind of, I'm going to find my person, but I got to stick with mm-hmm. it. So it's impressive that you even got to six, and still even went to the seventh. That takes a lot of, you took some risk, and, it paid off.
I was just very stubborn.
Right. Well, you're stubborn about the right thing.
I was like, no, one of them's going to work.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think one of the problems is, I can only speak for myself and the people I'm close to, but one of the problems that I had with the first six is that you put these people on such a high pedestal. Yeah. You expect so much from them and kind of forget that they're people too, and they probably also see therapists. And right. So when you put them on such a pedestal and you go to one and it doesn't match, immediately you're like, what's going on? Like, what is this? You just have to realize like they're people. Like in any profession, it's the same thing. You're not, like, there's incredible people and there's also people who are not so incredible. It's just a matter of weeding through everybody and seeing what fits.
Well, and I think, and I don't know if that your friend knew of the person or knew of kind of the type of counselors at your university, but I think oftentimes it helps, like if you're able to find somebody that also finds value in therapy and seeks out therapy that can make good recommendations, that also is very helpful. Like there's a good chance that that person's going to be, good for me too, or knows what they're doing, so that I can seek that out. So that transfer of trust of, no, I know that they do good work over there, like I'll go with you and show you, and being able to do that. But sometimes when you're just picking a name out of a phone book, you really don't know what you're getting into and what it's going to be like.
Man, that's exactly what I did for the first 6. I would walk in there and not know if I was seeing a lady or a man. I was just like, I just picked a name, and you would get in and be like, oh, maybe I should have done some research.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you just, no one, there's a common complaint of like, I don't know where to go for this stuff. So it's, you don't, there's, the one of the things that we focus on heavily in our community is making sure that people can't say that anymore. Like, get that information out there so people know that there are a lot of places for people to go, and these are your resources. Because I mean, that's really not a good thing if you don't have, if you feel like you don't know where to go, with that.
Yeah.
What are some of, just kind of on the tail end of things, what is the things that you practice regularly to take care of your mental health outside of, like we already mentioned, gratitude? Are there other things that you do to kind of help yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the biggest one is the show. I mean, it keeps me communicating with people from all around the world. Like, hey, talking about things that I would have never talked about in university or high school. So that kind of keeps the wheel turning. Other than that, I practice meditation. I try to do it once a day or once every other day. I try to really just, because my mind is going like this all the time. I have like thousands of thoughts a second. And so being able to just hone it down into one moment and kind of just get out of my headspace and into the present moment, I find that helps me a ton. I do sound baths. I don't know if you're probably familiar with those.
I'm not. Tell me about sound baths.
So it's basically, I mean, you can just go on YouTube and find them, but it's vibrations and things that it kind of tickles your eardrums and stuff. And you kind of just plug it in and lie there and let it almost bathe you in a sense with music and sound. And so that really calms me down. I love that stuff. I do yoga. I try to do a yoga as much as possible because it's kind of the meditative side, but also it gives you that physical exercise where afterwards you're like, yeah, I did that. That's pretty sick. And then
Lotus or something, or
exactly. Like you're levitating. You're like, yeah, I did that. I try to read as much as possible because as a kid, that was my escape, reading books and everything when I didn't really have very many friends. Like, that was what I did to escape, and my goal was read. I listen to podcasts. And then the final one is really, I mean, other than physical exercise, I try to do that every day. I try to keep moving because if I don't, so the one that I really try to do is I go on walks. I go on a lot of walks, and I just try to get connected with what's around me. Like sometimes I'll put a podcast in or I'll put some music in, but I try to really look around and see what's around me and just appreciate things that I never had appreciated before. So I think those are a couple of things that I do right now.
Yeah. So you get outside no matter how cold it is in Canada?
Man, I don't get cold.
You don't get cold?
Come on, I'm Canadian. I was born in this. Nah.
You're an Eskimo? You just kind of take it all in?
Man, I was born in an igloo. I thought that was the story that the Americans believed. We're born in igloos. We ride polar bears.
Oh, that would be cool, riding polar bears. So that would be amazing. But awesome. So I'm curious because I know this was a hard journey for you. I mean, but I also sense a very rewarding journey for you. Even is there anything that you learn from, like one thing that you can think of that you like learn from the negative experiences, like the experiences in your life that were really hard on you and really challenging and really maybe painful? Is there anything that you've taken from that or learned from that? We talk a lot about kind of adaptive experiences and taking finding an adaptive way to look at something that was, difficult and challenging.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting because throughout like where I am today, like I often go back and try to figure things out. And, you know, in the situations where, the negative experience came from a person or people, like
Mhm.
someone did me wrong or, whatever it was, like I got bullied or anything like that. It, coming to the other side has given me the chance to really analyze it and realize where people were coming from, if that makes sense. Because I've experienced more, I've listened to more shows, I've talked to more people, I've read more books, I've done all these things, and having that knowledge that I didn't have before, and being able to go back and realize where these people were coming from and where the situation kind of went wrong, it's definitely given me a peace of mind, in the sense where before I would have felt sorry for myself,
Mhm.
or I would have been angry because it's like it's me versus the world, when in
Right.
reality, like there was a whole multitude of factors that played into it. So I think that's the biggest one for me, is that I've been given this ability. I've been given a second chance, almost, where I can look back at these negative experiences and go, well, this happened because of this and that, and they were doing that because of this. It's just given me a lot of peace of mind, really.
So you do a lot of reflection. You reflect on kind of life experiences and try to be more curious about it. It sounds like, in terms of understanding those experiences.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with my anxiety, I relive every single minute of my life. Like I overanalyze it. I'm like, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do this? But now I'm able to relive those experiences, but not really relive them. Kind of more, analyze it, like you said, and just really go, okay, why did this happen? Like,
Right.
why did that person do this? Ah, I see. It's almost like you're doing a school project on it.
Yeah. Right. Researching history. So what would you I kind of admire your journey into wellness, and so I think there are many times where you could have given up, and not taken that step to get help, and so for those that might be listening that know that they really kind of need that support, but are maybe for whatever reason not able to make that step or to kind of push forward, like what you would kind of say to that person, or how you would kind of support that person in terms of making that first step, or to seek out mental health. I mean, I think one of our goals for our podcast is to really encourage people to kind of take that risk and feel safe enough to seek out help for their mental health. What kind of thoughts or advice or ideas do you have to kind of support that journey for other people?
Yeah, man, that first step is so scary. Like I think that's a feeling that's going to be ingrained in my head forever, is that first leap of, openness, because it's one thing to have these thoughts and to hate yourself and to feel this way, but it's another thing to actually open up and make it real. Like it's a scary thing to do. And so, I mean, what I would tell people, I mean, I wasn't ready for a long time. I mean, it took me until the very last possible minute to go, okay, maybe I'm ready. Right. It's so hard to be ready for it. But I think the beauty about what's going on right now in terms of the shift is that there's so many podcasts, there's so many YouTube videos, there's so many books, there's so many things that you can just go to in terms of resources and reading things where people are going through something similar. Mm-hmm. So I guess for people who are struggling to take that first step, first of all, don't be so hard on yourself. That first step is so hard. Like it's like, it's one of the hardest things you're going to do, straight up. And so don't be so hard on yourself if you can't do that right now, because It is a hard step. Be kind to yourself, but also kind of take that, you know, take that feeling of I really can't do this and kind of channel it into the external resources like books, like podcasts, like all of these things. Listen to other people's experiences, listen to these stories, listen to this guidance, and then kind of build that confidence over time to eventually open up about this stuff. This being able to open up about, you know, your deepest, darkest secret doesn't just happen. You know,
right.
It's not like one day you wake up, you're like, I'm gonna do it. It comes
right.
with time and hard work. And if, you know, you have to do hard work before opening up, there's no shame in that.
Start in the shallow end. Don't just dive right into the deep end.
Exactly. I mean, when I was learning swimming, I got pushed into the deep end right away, and it was terrifying. So you don't have to do that. Just like take the ladder into the shallow end and just kind of tread water over to the deep end. You'll get there.
Right.
Just don't be so hard on yourself.
And it is kind of a journey. It is not something that also happens overnight, or that you've got it all fixed. That it's a process. It was work, right? I mean, it's something that if this is kind of where you want to see yourself, just like anything, you have to work at it. Because, you know, there's some things you have to probably undo.
Oh man. I mean, I still deal with it, you know, like it's, I say all these things and, you know, I tell my story and I share these things. I'm not out of it. You know, I still have my terrible days. I still have days where I wake up and I'm like, damn it, I woke up today. Like that doesn't just go away. It's just, you know, you're able to handle it now. You're able to process that emotion as opposed to just suppressing it or letting it take over you. So yeah, it's absolutely a journey. You get dips along the way. I think a lot of people have this misconception that recovery is just a straight line up. And at the end of the day, you're going to get dips. It's just pushing through those dips that really counts.
Yeah. Yeah. So the podcast you're on is called The Mental Corner. Is it on all the different platforms, or where can people go to listen to you more? No, it's every podcast platform and YouTube. I'm out everywhere. I'm on Instagram at The Mental Corner. I think, well, I'm on every social media, but I think if you were to try to communicate with me or, you know, keep up to date with anything, Instagram's your best bet. I'm not very active on the other ones. So Instagram at The Mental Corner, and then The Mental Corner podcast wherever you want to listen. Okay. And you had mentioned a lot of reading, so I'm curious is what your recommendations are for a book that if people wanted to kind of work on their mental health, something that is a good first start or help, as you've seem to have found help in books in supporting your mental health.
Yeah. So this one, I mean, I don't know if you swear on the show, but it's Unf Yourself by Gary John Bishop. It's the first self-help book I ever read, and I loved it. Yeah. That one definitely helped. There's one, I think the biggest one is Lost Connections by Joanne Hari. That's like one of my favorite books of all time, and that really opened my eyes to the power of connection and the power of, you know, coming together. Those are the two that I would definitely highly suggest. I also have this one's called Personal Next, and it's more so for the athlete side. It's talking about an Olympian who, after she retired, didn't know what to do because her whole identity revolved around sport. And so I think that one was definitely helpful for me because, you know, as an athlete, your whole identity is sport. And then once it's gone, you're like, what do I do now? And there's that kind of emptiness. So those are three books that I would definitely recommend for anyone listening.
Have you seen the Michael Phelps documentary?
No, but I want to.
Yes.
I really want to.
It's pretty intense, but it's a good one. But it's all about what that last book's about. I mean, in covering definitely that Olympic athlete, you're training 4 years for 5 minutes, you know, in a lot of situations, or, you know, a minute and a half, and just all the stuff that plays around, and just kind of the need for mental health in that arena as well. So it's pretty powerful. So if you take the get free 7 days on HBO Max and then just watch the so
I'll do it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's good. So, but yeah, absolutely. So, well, Harry, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for sharing your story and just letting people know that, you know, hope is there, and that, people that struggle can find their way out. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing to try to help others in the ways that you can. So it was really great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I love, I love filming my own episodes, but I also love coming on this side and telling my story. So thank you for giving me the platform.